Okay, cool. It's just about 5 after, so I think we'll get started. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Molly, and I work with Little Sis on this project, our Research Tools for Organizers training series. We're really happy to have you all on with us tonight to delve into a topic that is really like central to doing power research in a social movement context that we do a lot here at Little Sis, which is investigating money in politics. I'm just going to do a couple housekeeping things at top. And then mostly we're going to spend tonight with Jen and Rob, two researchers at Little Sis, who are going to walk us through how to actually do this kind of research, how power researchers approach it, ways that this research can be used in campaigning and movement building contexts, all that good stuff. So just so people have a sense of our agenda for tonight, we'll probably be on for somewhere between like an hour and a half. We're doing the welcome right now. You all have introduced yourself a little bit on the chat. Thanks for doing that. We're going to talk a little bit kind of broadly about why it is that people on this call, as part of the different orgs and campaigns that you're working on, might want to investigate money in politics, and also how at Little Sis and in some other examples, you can use money in politics research and campaigning contexts. And then we're going to spend really the bulk of the night going over a couple of kind of central tools for money in politics research, the Federal Election Commission database, a little bit on state databases where you can look up more local campaign finance information, and then Open Secrets, which is a great kind of amalgamator of a lot of this data. And then we'll also share some kind of like challenges that folks often come up against when doing this kind of campaign finance research, how we approach troubleshooting it sometimes, and then we'll close out. So that's how we're going to spend most of our time. A couple of things that we're going to ask you all to do tonight. So there should be a chat, which you guys are already chatting in, and that's great. Feel free to kind of like share thoughts in there. And we'll ask you a couple of times throughout the training to share kind of answers to specific prompts in the chat. If you have specific questions about things that we're talking about, use the Q&A function, because it's a little bit hard for us to sometimes like track what's going on in the chat. If you put something in the Q&A, Allie from Little Sis, who's helping us with the backend tech tonight, we'll be monitoring that and make sure if we can answer your questions there. So chit chat in the chat, questions in the Q&A. And kind of do your best to keep questions kind of pertinent to the things we're talking about tonight, and just kind of be mindful of leaving space for everyone in the chat to contribute. I think a lot of people who are on tonight have been to other trainings of these in the series that we've been doing. But just in case you're new to Research Tools for Organizers or to Little Sis, a little bit about us. We are a watchdog research organization that specializes in power research and mapping powerful people and organizations in partnership with social movement groups. We train organizations and activists, journalists, other members of the general public on the ins and outs of how to do power research in order to kind of build up capacity to do investigative research about powerful people and corporations within social movements. Tonight is an example of that. We also oversee pieces of tech that help facilitate that kind of research. So our kind of flagship piece of tech is littlesis.org, which we sometimes call the opposite of Big Brother. It's a free open source platform that tracks connections between powerful people, billionaires, corporations, politicians, think tanks, nonprofits, universities, all the stuff that we've been talking about. It's kind of like a one-stop shop for tracking those relationships. And then also Oligrapher, which is our tool that helps visualize data and kind of map out those power relationships. So we're not going to talk about those things tonight really, but definitely check those out. Like I mentioned, this training is part of a larger series that we're calling Research Tools for Organizers. It's a free monthly training from us. The idea is that, we do this kind of research as part of campaigns, as part of movement building, and we want more people to know how to do it. We want to like skill up all of you all on how to do it. And so this is one piece of that. We're actually towards the second half of the series right now. So right now we're doing money in politics. There's 2 more training sessions before the end of the year. Next month on October 17th, we're going to be going into researching politicians, which should be a really good one. And then November, our last one is about corporate power formations, and a little bit more about kind of synthesis of this kind of research, how to figure out kind of who runs your city, state, etc. So make sure to put those on your calendar. If you haven't been able to join us previously in any of those trainings that I just talked about, or that you saw on the screen of previous ones sound interesting to you, you can scan this code, and all the slides for all the trainings are there. We also have recordings of them up on our YouTube, which is Public Accountability Initiative is the name of the channel. So if you kind of are interested in tonight's and realize, oh, I wish I had been on the one that was about researching nonprofits, or I wish I had been on the one that was about power mapping a corporation, make sure to check those out. So tonight, like I've said, our focus is investigating money in politics. We wanted to talk briefly kind of about why we do that research at Little Sis. And I think it's probably something that people are familiar with. It's probably one of the things that actually kind of research that people are most familiar with, even if you just have kind of like a passing knowledge of power research. So if people want to put in the chat, what are reasons that you, as part of the organizing or campaigning you're involved in, might want to investigate money in politics? Feel free to throw in the chat right now why you might be interested in doing that. I saw people are putting some things in here, interested in connecting investor money, campaign contributions, and fossil fuel projects. So looking to see what elected officials are taking money from fossil fuel companies around particular projects. Figuring out who's funding certain legislative proposals, totally. Monitor how money interests are impacting public education, how police contractors and big corporations are capturing municipal politicians, who's influencing local council members, local elected officials, uncovering conflicts of interest. Totally. These are all reasons why we might be interested in investigating money in politics. I think kind of from a real bird's eye view and what we see at Little Sis in doing this kind of research all the time is that we're really living in an age of both unprecedented kind of concentration of wealth and as well as unprecedented political spending by the people who hold that wealth. So we have been seeing that. I mean, I feel like every day this year there's been a new headline about that. I'm sure people have been following AIPAC, the Israeli lobbies, like tremendous spending to influence election outcomes, like targeting Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman successfully in primaries. Elon Musk, one of the billionaires that people who've been on these calls before have been tracking and organizing around, committed to giving $45 million a month to a pro-Trump super PAC. There's been a lot of analysis and coverage of the way that billionaire tech wealth has fueled J.D. Vance's political career. And basically, we're at a point where almost every election that happens, kind of records for spending and for big dollar spending are being broken. So 2020 election spending was the most expensive election in history. It will probably be broken in 2024. And we're also seeing massive amounts of corporate money, billionaire money, think tank money, dark money being spent kind of at every level of our political system. So not just at federal races, not just at state Senate races, but statewide legislatures, even down to like school board races, local city council races. Again, like every year, it seems like there is a new kind of record broken for the most expensive judicial races. So we really at Little Sis see the ways that money influences undermining our democracy, influences all the different kind of issue areas that people on this call are working on, whether it's fighting fossil fuel industry and projects, fighting for funding of public education, fighting around particular development initiatives at a local level, kind of investigating who's spending money can be a key part, both of kind of understanding the power structure that you're up against, and then also figuring out how do we undermine their power, because a key part of kind of the corporate elite strategy for moving their agenda is having politicians that will do their bidding. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. A couple of things about this kind of research, that it can be a little bit like terminology heavy. There's lots of different vehicles and ways that money moves in our political system when it comes to money in politics. And it is getting more complicated and more sophisticated kind of all the time. But I wanted to share a couple of key terms so that people can kind of have them in mind before Jen and Rob are showing some examples later. So, if we think about kind of how the flow of money happens when we're talking about money in politics, there are people and institutions and organizations that are giving money, the contributors. And there's a couple of different kinds of those. So probably the most obvious one, the one that people on this call are probably most familiar with, have given as, is as an individual. Those are individual donations, people who are giving money to people running for office. There are also things called political action committees, or PACs, which is a committee that raises and spends money to elect and defeat candidates, and they represent groups. So they represent businesses, for example, Amazon or Microsoft or Apple will often have a PAC. Labor unions will have a PAC. Ideological groups like the NRA, the National Rifle Association, will have a PAC. And basically what happens is those groups solicit money from their employees or from their members, and then pool all that money together into a PAC. And kind of the leaders of that PAC will make decisions about where that money goes. So that's another kind of way that money gets donated in the campaign finance world. The other way is also directly from corporations or from LLCs, limited liability corporations. That's money coming kind of directly from corporate coffers. So that's not a company going and saying, I'm the head of the Amazon PAC, I'm in charge of Amazon's political strategy, and I'm getting employees to donate. That's just like straight from the Amazon coffers. Oftentimes, there's kind of regulations around that. Committees and corporations and LLCs can't give in federal elections, but oftentimes they're allowed to in state and local races. So it's worth kind of paying attention to. So again, thinking about that flow of money, the other kind of big spenders or ways that money is spent in races is also through super PACs, which people have probably heard of. The AIPAC headline that I had earlier as an example, that's an AIPAC super PAC. Those are also called independent expenditure only committees. And that is basically a type of PAC that came into existence in 2010 after Citizens United. And super PACs are allowed to raise and spend unlimited sums of money. So there's not limits on how much they can raise and spend, unlike in a lot of those other types of contributors. They can only make independent expenditures to support or oppose political candidates. So they're not donating money directly to candidates. They're spending alongside supporting or opposing them. They're supposed to be prohibited from coordinating with the campaigns committee, although there's instances of that being weakly enforced. And this has kind of become the kind of like unlimited bank account way for party leaders to raise money. So that's kind of who's giving, the entities that can give money. And then on the other end, there's the who's taking the money question. And again, there's a couple of different kind of common ways that elected officials and political parties kind of set up vehicles to receive that money that you guys will see over the course of tonight. So the most basic is the campaign committee. So that's a committee set up by a candidate to finance a campaign for office. That's pretty like vanilla. There are also joint fundraising committees. So That's going to be a fundraising committee set up by 2 or more candidates or political parties or a combination of the two to jointly raise money. And what that means is that a donor can write one big check, it goes to the joint fundraising committee, and then whoever is in charge of the joint fundraising committee can decide how to divide the money between themselves, often making it so that every entity that's part of that committee can kind of max out the total number that they're allowed to take. There's also leadership PAC. So this is like a fundraising committee that's formed by a politician to make donations to other candidates' campaigns. So, higher level elected officials, senators, people with big profiles, big fundraising machines will set these up and then kind of like distribute the money to their political allies. And then there's also party committees. So that's the DNC and the RNC. People can make donations directly to those as well. So that's a little bit about kind of the nitty gritty of these different kinds of vehicles. Like I said, this can be a little bit of kind of like terminology heavy research. There's a really great resource through Open Secrets. They have a glossary. I put the URL here that if you want to look up later, of course, you can refer to these slides, but they have like a really exhaustive glossary of different kind of campaign finance terms that can also be really helpful. Another resource that I wanted to share before handing it over to Jen, I was mentioning that there are limits to certain kinds of spending, limits that individuals can give, that campaigns can receive. And that's going to be different at different levels of government. But Open Secrets also has a really useful resource on that, this contribution limits page. The URL is down there again. So if you're trying to figure out like, how many people, who are the people that maxed out their donation amount to my local elected official, you could use this as a guide for that. So there's a couple of things to just help you and to refer back to as you're starting to do this. So yeah, I'm going to hand it to Jen, who's going to talk a little bit about using this kind of research kind of on the ground context.
Great. Thanks so much, Molly. That was a great overview, even for me. So many different terms to get to know. Well, part of our training tonight will be Rob and I walking through some really interesting databases that you can use to get started doing your campaign finance research. But before we do that, we want to take a look at how campaign finance research might be able to be used in corporate campaigns or campaigns that challenge power. So as you may know, if you've been on one of these trainings before and you know a little bit about our organization, we do not do research for research's sake or just because it's interesting or just put it kind of out into the ether and see what happens. We really want to be trying to support direct challenges to power and influence and these corporations and these billionaires that are just flooding our politics with money, as Molly was talking about earlier. And campaign finance research is really one of the most fundamental and versatile research skills that you can have when it comes to just wide, broad applicability to different campaigns. So to kind of get our brains, we're about to look at some interesting databases with a lot of numbers and names. And so to get us thinking in sort of like a campaigning mindset, wanted to talk through a few different ways that campaign finance research has been used in different campaigns and can be used. So why don't we go to our first slide here, Molly? So probably the most straightforward way that a lot of people are coming in with is identifying which corporations or powerful people may be trying to influence politicians via their campaign finance donations. And you'll certainly see some big numbers coming from different corporations, their executives, their PACs, and various wealthy people when we're doing this research. But one great example of how this can actually then be turned into a campaigning context, we have this example here from the campaign for the Build Public Renewables Act that happened in New York a couple years ago. This was a campaign to empower New York's public power authority to start to build some renewable power infrastructure that would be publicly owned. But that campaign and that effort was met with broad opposition from, as you can guess, utility corporations that wanted to keep that private. And so one of the things that this campaign did was to expose this influence that these specific utility corporations that were against this act had over the New York State politicians. And so what they did was make these like really cool, like Venmo-esque graphics showing all the high dollar donations going to various state assembly and Senate members, really just to highlight which members of the assembly were really captured by this industry, and really highlighting, what might be behind their opposition. This bill actually ended up being incorporated into the state budget in 2023. So a win there, but a really great example of a creative use to highlight that data. So we can go to the next one here. Another sort of use case is to, the campaign finance data doesn't always necessarily need to be the star of the show, but can contribute to a broader policy or corporate campaign. So the example I have here actually comes from Michigan. I think I saw someone mention that they were from Michigan. But in Michigan, campaigners were fighting a major rate hike by investor-owned utility DTE. And their goal was to combat the rate hike. So DTE comes in saying they need to hike rates on consumers, as they often do, to make shifts or changes to their infrastructure improvements, yada, yada. The goal with this campaign was to fight that rate hike by essentially saying DTE already has enough money to do these improvements. They don't need our money. And so one of the pieces of this campaign that was effective was to incorporate the campaign finance data into the argument and show that DTA was spending a lot of money on lobbying, on trying to influence politicians and things like that, and didn't necessarily need the money in the way that they were talking about. So in this case, campaign finance data wasn't the primary point of the argument, but it just helped build the narrative of the campaign. So let's go to the next one. Another one that is, it's always a little bit fun to call people on their bullshit. We'll just call it like it is. But holding campaign finance data is a great way to hold politicians accountable for all the different things that they like to commit to and pledge to in the moment. So one good example of this is the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge. It was a campaign to get oil and gas money out of elections and sort of pressure politicians to pledge not to take any money from that industry. As we'll see later, there's a ton of money going into our elections from this industry. But campaign finance research is a great way to make sure that they're honoring their commitments. So this way you can know, they might say that they're pledging not to take these contributions, but you can follow up on that and try to hold them accountable. And if we go to the next slide, conversely, corporations like to do the exact same thing. So often a corporation will make a pledge to support or not support a politician or a certain effort based on an issue that their consumers might feel some way about. One great example of this was there were many corporations in early 2021, AT&T included, who pledged not to give campaign donations to politicians who had tried to block the certification of the 2020 election, who were in that election deniers camp. So AT&T, like many other corporations, put out these big public statements making this claim they're on the right side of this issue. Well, researchers using campaign finance data were able to go in and check and just make sure, you put out this statement, are you actually doing it? And this researcher, Judd, who is really, really great at bird dogging corporate accountability in this way, found that AT&T, and this is just one capture of a tweet, a long thread of tweets, that many of these corporations just basically immediately started supporting these election deniers anyway. So again, this is another way to not just make your case and do a campaign, but actually do that kind of follow-up work. And then the last slide I have here, let's see, it's just very simply around political education or popular education, helping inform others about the role of money in politics and then taking it from there. Sometimes there might not be a specific campaign that you're necessarily jumping into or supporting, but you want to sort of like highlight a particular donor or particular issue. I have found that campaign finance research that corporations giving money to politicians and that as a stream of influence is probably the most straightforward and easy thing for folks to understand and run with. And so a great example of this is the All Eyes on Yass campaign. All Eyes on Yass. Yass being YASS, Jeffrey Yass, a billionaire in Pennsylvania of TikTok fame. That campaign did a really excellent job putting on political education workshops and training over 100 different organizers and members of groups, base building groups around the state of Pennsylvania to really make the case around why Jeffrey Yass, or show how Jeffrey Yass was super entrenched in Pennsylvania politics and had really captured a broad swath of the political apparatus there. Through doing that work and making that case and showing that data, they were able to help organize these state groups to basically put that information into action and created their own pledge of their, I think it's called the No on Yass pledge, pressuring politicians to pledge not to accept money from Yass. The goal there to really drive a wedge between this political apparatus that Yass was really had a strong grip on, and then undermining his local influence. And I'll mention that all of this political education was happening before the whole national awareness of Yass around TikTok was taking place. So they've been doing this work for some time. So those are just some examples of, and I see Ali has put the pledge in there. Those are just some examples of different ways that campaign finance data can be utilized for campaigns that challenge power that might be like a little bit less obvious. So again, a very versatile tool, a very great skill to sort of have in your belt. So now as we're going to sort of, with that in mind, thinking with our campaigning hats on, we're going to sort of switch gears and get into the research tools. Now, before we get into it, we actually put this here. So in addition to the training being recorded and sent out, these slides will be available also. And so you can use this as sort of like a cheat sheet. Which database should I use? That's kind of why we threw this slide in here. But in just a second, Rob is going to be talking us through how to work the Federal Election Commission, the FEC database. The FEC is the organization where basically campaigns have to file all of the donor data. Any information that you give when you're making a donation, it goes to them. So this is really going to be where you will find the most up-to-date information. It's like the most up-to-date you can possibly get. So if you're looking to sort of like keep on something as it's happening, this is where you want to go. It's really great for individual donor research, as Rob is going to show you, and really great for really diving in. So if you know your target and you want as up-to-date and most specific data possible, the FEC database is definitely a way to go. So then after Rob shows that, I'm going to walk us through some of the cool features of the Open Secrets database. Open Secrets is essentially an aggregator. It takes all of that FEC data and does a lot of interesting coding by industry and corporations, and it spits out a lot of sort of totals and like sort of big picture numbers for us. So it's really great for identifying top donors and identifying which politicians are bringing in the most cash. So I'll be showing that database again, really, really more sort of like high level, big numbers, and the FEC database being really great for really sort of digging in. And with that, I'll kick it over to Rob to do the FEC database walkthrough.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Hey, everybody. Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen here and start walking through how we use the Federal Election Commission database. So we'll start here by clicking on this little campaign finance data drop-down menu. And then you can get at the information a couple different ways. My favorite way is to go over to the right side here and click on look up contributions from specific individuals. This just takes you right to the search field where you can start typing in names for the political donors that you want to look at. You can see here before I start searching for anybody that this is showing almost 128 million individual donation results right now. And this is showing everything in the 2023 to 2024 filing period, and specifically between the dates of January 1st, 2023 and the end of this year. So yeah, that's to say this is an enormous data set. And thankfully, we have a lot of different fields and filters over here on the left side of the screen where we can start typing in names and start narrowing down the results that we're looking for. So for this example, I'm just going to keep following right off of the last example Jen gave from the campaign examples. I'm typing Jeffrey Yass into the name field under contributor details. And when I click that little arrow, you can see this is now showing us every donation, again, in this same default time period from somebody with Jeffrey Yass in their name. Right off the bat, we can see that we have donations both from Mr. Jeffrey Yass from Pennsylvania, who is, that's the donor we're interested in this example. But this is also showing us, every donation from everybody that also has that in their name. So we're pulling up a lot of, at the top here in these most recent donations, we have donations from somebody named Jeffrey Yaskin in Oregon. I'll show you in just a second a couple different ways that we can start to filter that out and narrow it down before ultimately what I really like to do is download all of my search results into a spreadsheet, which I can then bring into a spreadsheet program like Excel or Google Sheets and start working with it that way in order to sort of really get crunchy with it. The first thing I want to show is that you can really easily filter these or sort them rather by amount by just clicking on the amount right there. Now this is showing us everything from the largest donation amount going down to the smallest. So right at the top of the list here, we have Jeffrey Yass, who is employed by the Susquehanna International Group. On February 29th, Leap Day this year, he gave $800,000 to the Moderate PAC, Inc. If we want to see a little closer in here, we can actually click this gray arrow all the way on the right. And this is going to bring up a little more information about this donation. And we can also, by clicking on this open image button, it will open a new tab, which I believe you should all be able to see, showing the exact page from the FEC report filed by the Moderate PAC that displays this donation. Now, these used to actually be like handwritten pages. Now, almost entirely they're digitally generated. But if we scroll down here, there's room for basically 3 donations on each page. And right here on B, we have the donation from Jeffrey Yass. It gives, an address, a street address, city and state and zip code. It shows the date of the receipt right here on the right, the amount of the receipt, as well as a year-to-date aggregate. So if this was his, second $800,000 donation, for example, this year-to-date aggregate would, show like 1.6 million. But this is, for here, this is the first one. It looks like the only one he gave in this time period to this group. And this is really kind of what this record looks like. Now, if you are going, really deep on one individual donor, you're going to want to take note of the city and state and zip code that this donor is giving from, as well as this address, because having those in your hand, they can really help clear up, if you're looking at donations from 2 people who have the exact same identical name, even though they're 2 different people, by using some of this other information, like the name of the employer, the address they're giving from, as well as, just the general sort of amounts they're giving, that can either, help you confirm that, yes, these 2 donations did come from the same person, or say, no, it just happens to be a coincidence that, 2 people with the same name. The way the amount helps there is, if you're looking at a billionaire political donor, but the donations you're looking at are all, really small amounts, then there's good odds that, maybe that's not from the person that you are intending to look at. So I'm going to close this tab now and go back to our search results here. And I'm also going to close this little detail window to get back to this full page of results. Oh, another thing I should probably say is you can also sort these by the receipt date in order to get like the most recent ones down to the earliest ones. You can click it again to sort it, going the other direction. The default when it spits these results back at you is to sort them this way by most recent to the opposite of that, the oldest one. So yeah, like I said, right now we've got 67 results here for donations from somebody with the words Jeffrey Yass in their name in this time period. If we want to narrow this down even more, we can say, look, we know we are looking at specifically the Jeffrey Yass from Pennsylvania. So maybe we want to only return donations from Pennsylvania. What we can do to narrow that down is scroll down, and we're looking over on the left here, and all these different filters. And if you go down to more contributor details, you can select like exactly the state that you want to return results for. And you can actually add, I think up to, for every one of these categories, I think you can add, up to 10. So you could search for only Jeffrey Yass donations from Pennsylvania and Florida, for example. For this, I'm just going to put Pennsylvania on there, and that says filter added, 56 fewer results. So now when I scroll back up to our results, we have these 11 donations, all from Jeffrey Yass, all from Pennsylvania addresses. But, if you'll look over in the employer field, it can be a little confusing because for most of these, we have Susquehanna International Group, or the acronym SIG, which stands for Susquehanna International Group. But some of these, the employer says managing director instead. So when you see something like that, that's sort of, incongruent with what you're trying to find, you can, again, open up this record, and you can either look at the source information here. You can see what happened with this one is they just entered the employer, Susquehanna Partners, SIG, in the occupation field, and they put the occupation managing director in the employer field. One thing you're really going to want to keep an eye out for, though, is when people may have positions at multiple companies or multiple organizations, they may list those donations coming from different places, or they may not list their employer at all. Technically, they are required to, but this is not the sort of thing that is very heavily policed, really at all. The other thing I wanted to show was that you can actually include that employer information as a filter. So again, I'm just to make sure everyone's following along, I'm back over on the left side where these filters are, and I can type Susquehanna right into here. And then this is filtering this down even more. This can be really useful if you have a person with like a very, very common name, like, Mike Jones or Don Smith or something like that, and you know where they work. You can enter that employer in this field and hopefully come up with some donations from that person. Then what I would do again is I'm going to check those addresses in there. I'm going to write those addresses down and say, I know these addresses are associated with this donor. So then I might take the filter off, go back to the larger list of all the Mike Joneses, and start checking those for the same addresses that I know that are confirmed for the person that I'm looking for. Finally, the last thing I want to show, and I think this is it before I can hand it back off to Jen, is that, like I said, usually what I'm going to do is I'm going to download all of this information and I'm going to bring it into, a spreadsheet program. I can then, really, really easily sort of add it all up to see what is the total amount that this person has given in this time period that I'm looking at. Or, I can say, I can add up and say this guy gave, this much to this person. You can see here, for example, we've got, 2 donations to Michael Waltz for Congress. I can say he gave this much over this time period to this candidate, spread over, 2 donations, 5 donations, 10 donations, whatever. But by bringing this into downloading the data, bringing it into a spreadsheet program, you can start to sort of analyze it a lot easier than just looking at this web interface. And to download it, it's really easy. You just click this export button up in the upper right here, and it's going to show you a little pop-up down here. The pop-up pops up and it kind of goes dot, dot, dot. And then when you get the check mark, that's when you know it's ready to take out of the oven. You just click the download button and it downloads it to wherever you, save your files. Then you can bring that into your whatever program you like to use best. And that's just about it. So I'm going to stop the share now. I'm going to hand it back to Jin to show off Open Secrets. Oh, the last thing I want to say before I hand it off is this whole training is really kind of heavily focused on the federal database and federal elections. Open Secrets that Jin is going to show does have some local data, but basically the methods that I just laid out for using the Federal Elections Commission, primary source database is roughly going to be the same for your state database. We'll talk about it a little later, but there are differences there in like what they have to report. But generally that's kind of the way you do it when you're doing this, approaching this research from the perspective of there's this one political donor or group of political donors that I'm interested in. That's how that's sort of the method, and you can analogize that really easily. Sorry, I went a little over there, Jin. I don't want to take up any more of your time, so I'm going to hand it off to you now.
Yeah, no problem. Well, the good news is that Open Secrets has now actually started offering state data. It used to be a federal only database, but they joined forces with beloved Follow the Money, which was doing the hard work of taking all of the 50 different databases for state campaign finance research and trying to aggregate that data. They joined with Open Secrets, and now much of that data is there. It's still very new, but I'm going to show you what they have as we walk through this. So if you have used Open Secrets before, let us know in the chat, especially if there's some way that you use Open Secrets that you particularly like. Because as I'm walking through this, you're going to see that there's just an immense amount of information in here. In fact, there's actually so much information that we're talking about this again as part of our training in October, looking at politicians. So there's a few things that might catch your eye as we're walking through this, but I promise you all of the cool stuff that we don't see today, we'll see in October. So this is sort of a two-parter when it comes to the Open Secrets database. But definitely encourage poking around. I'm going to be focusing on data that might be most useful sort of for campaigning purposes and especially just getting started using this database. So we're just going to dive in. This is the landing page, opensecrets.org. Pretty straightforward. It has a nice internal search bar here that you can use. I'm going to show you some of its sort of specific tools that it offers that you can start kind of playing with on your own and looking things up. And I'm really going to focus on these top 3 tabs, the top 3 out of the 4 here, starting with candidates and office holders. So I'm just going to click this, and you can see there's a bunch of different interesting places we can go. I'm going to start just with this overview. And this is where we want to go if we're interested in looking at, for instance, the top donors or the donors to a specific candidate for office. And I'm pleased to say that they not only have federal candidates here, they also have state. I say state, they probably don't have local municipal level folks, but they have governors, state legislatures, judicial office holders, and other sort of like statewide office holders, like your treasurer, comptroller, positions like that. So definitely dive in there. But what I want to show here is sort of how this data is structured when we look at this. So this, again, this is just sort of an overview. You can get into like looking up a specific member of Congress, but they're just showing the sort of party leadership here. I'm going to show us Mitch McConnell. This guy's been around for a really, really long time. So his campaign finance data is pretty interesting. So this is what sort of like how you might think of like a profile page for a particular member of Congress or a politician that's on Open Secrets looks like. So what you'll see here is you'll see a little bit about who they are when they're first elected. This is very important. I think it's a little easy to miss the way it's designed, but at the top here, it says now showing data for 2024. You can click that and adjust for whatever time frame. It's in election cycles, so it's in a 2-year time frame. And you can even do just overall career. And then it'll show you is this data related to the campaign committee, the leadership PAC, or both? And so they really split it out, and you can sort of customize what you want to look at. But scrolling down here, we'll see the top industry over the last 5 years for Mitch McConnell, people who said that they were retired, top contributor there, Kent. We can scroll down. It's going to give us our top 5 contributors. And this is a really important piece. Actually, you'll see this a lot in Open Secrets, and I just wanted to take a moment to point it out. But you'll notice when you see this contributor data, like Kent companies here, you're going to see the total. And you're also going to see over here on the right where it says individuals and PACs. This can be a little bit confusing because it's not really chopped up. But what this is telling us is basically of this total, this amount is from individuals and this amount is from PACs. And so these two, the individual and PAC number, should add up to the total number. And this is super important for us as researchers when we're trying to be precise in our communications about what we're finding. So we don't want to say, oh, Mitch McConnell got, $688,000 from Kent companies. We want to say he got $688,000 from employees of Kent companies. And we can actually use this and then go to the FEC and see exactly who those donors are. We can do that here too, but it's probably easier to go into the FEC and look up by employer. So we'll also be able to see top industries here, total raised over years, and so on. Lots of interesting data. Again, like I said, this is a great aggregator for sort of top line numbers. There's a bunch of different ways you can navigate here. You can look at who specifically contributors are, what sort of geography they're coming from, so basically where these donors are coming from, and so on. So definitely, I'm going to be moving quick because there's a lot to look at, but definitely poke around here and check out this data. Going back just to show a state example, so we want to look at our governors. Now, again, like I said, this is a relatively new function of this database, so it's not quite caught up to where they are with their federal data yet. You'll notice here it's showing data for the 2022 election year. That's as most recent as it is. And so let me show you, I'm in New York, so I'll show my governor, Kathy Hochul. Click on hers, and as you can see, a little bit more stripped down than the federal. Again, just getting started with this, but we still get top contributors and top industries here, and we can adjust the election year for that as well. Another thing to note, state campaign finance data, when it comes to the different rules and regulations, what people can donate, what they have to do, it's all very different. In New York, you do not have to put your employer down. So that's why we're seeing here organization unavailable for these records for $22 million of this total. That's not some conspiracy. It's just, you don't have to do it. And so people don't do it. And so we don't get that sort of granular look at who the employers are. State campaign finance stuff is really funky. So it's really important to make sure that if you're looking at state data, that you're really sort of up to date on what the different sort of rules and requirements are for donors in those places. So again, this is if you were looking from the view of, I want to know information about a specific politician that I might be looking into, you can look here. Another really interesting tool in this dropdown, you can also find it in the research tools dropdown, is this Get Local feature. The Get Local feature is a way to look up donors from a particular state. Now, these are, if you want to see all donors, say, you know, I'm from Virginia originally. So if I want to know all the different donors from Virginia, how do they donate? I can click that and it's going to give me sort of like a rough overview of what these donors are doing, who the donors are. Now, keep in mind that the donors are located in the state that you select. So the state of Virginia in my case, but it's showing their federal donations. So they don't have this function for the state level yet, it seems, but hopefully they'll be bringing that in soon. But this is just an interesting way if you're looking for like a specific, like to really get a better understanding of who the big donors are in your state, who they might be donating to. This is really great. You can go by state, you can get really granular and go by your zip code. And again, just see who locally is making contributions and who they might be contributing to. So those are two within this sort of candidates and office holders bucket of data that Open Secrets has here. You guys in October will be looking at this personal finances stuff, so definitely a reason to come back. But now let's go and look at this elections and fundraising data piece. So again, a lot of stuff to look at here. We're going to just do sort of like this overview look. And so with this, Open Secrets has again pulled in all of this data from the FEC and is showing us sort of like broad analysis of how much money has been raised, how much has been spent, what's coming from PACs, what's coming from individuals, the presidential race, the House, and the Senate. So interesting sort of just top line data. What I really like about this section of the data is looking at this donors section here. So again, I'm loosely interested in the amount of money going into these candidates, but I'm mostly interested in who's giving it and who they're giving it to. So clicking this donors button here, and again, there's a few different ways to get to this information from this database, but this will show me who are the biggest donors, who are individual donors, who are the top organizational donors, and who are the top PAC donors. So if I click who are the biggest donors here, I can select whatever cycle. I'm going to keep it on 2024. I can select federal contributions by individuals, super PAC donations. I'm going to keep it federal. And if I scroll down here, you'll see that it gives me this nice sort of table. Anything with the little red bar on the left means that they're mostly giving to Republicans. Anything with the blue bar on the left means they're mostly giving to Democrats. It doesn't get more granular than that in this case. But so what we see here is the name of the contributor. Timothy Mellon has the esteem of being the biggest contributor in the 2024 election cycle thus far. Total contributions, $115 million. Total hard money. So again, of that money, 36,000 is what's considered hard money. So that's money going directly to a candidate or candidate committee. And then most of that, far bulk, is going to outside money. So to these PACs and super PACs. And so that shows you not only how much they're giving, but how they're giving and what they're giving to. And so then we have the amount that's going to Democrats, the amount that's going to Republicans. And what's pretty cool about this is you can play around with it a little bit. It doesn't have sort of the filters that you might want. You might want to see who is like this is the top 100 donors. The Winklevoss twins are at the bottom rung of the top 100 here. So there's a little bit of versatility there in the way you can organize it, but not much. But you can also export to a CSV and play around with it a little bit there. Similarly, you can look at who are the biggest organization donors. And I really like Open Secrets for this type of research over individual donors, because you'll see here, all of the organizations are hyperlinked, meaning they have their own profile page. So just like with the individual donors, we have the name, contributions, how it's split between direct contributions and outside money, Dems, Republicans. But if we want to know just like a little bit more about like a specific organization, say we want this Uline. A lot of people who aren't from the Midwest might not know the name of this company or what it is. You can click on that and get to essentially a profile page for this entity, much like what we saw for the politicians. And what it'll do for us is show us, so we're on the summary page right now, so we'll just show that. You see the top recipients for this particular cycle from Uline. And so again, it's showing the amount of money total, the amount that's from individuals that are connected to Uline, and the amount from the organization itself. And that's also showing the type of recipient that took in the money, or who this recipient is. So the Restoration PAC, it's an outside group. Club for Growth Action, outside group, and so on. But you can get, look a little bit deeper into who the recipients are here, look at just a lot of different pieces of data, just as you scan through these organizational profiles. Again, moving pretty quick because we have a couple more things to cover here. Let's go back away from organization profiles to, where was I? Here. So we were looking at the top organization contributors. Now let's look at top political action committees. Same deal as with the top organizational contributors. This gets into the PAC. So the PAC is sort of in between here of, it's taking money in and it's spitting money out. So what is the sort of the top PAC and it's spending? I believe someone mentioned APAC earlier. We can click on that. So just like with the organizational profiles, the PACs themselves have individual profiles. You can see here, there's two different PACs associated with APAC. We're going to click on this main one here. There's the PAC and there's the super PAC. And this will give us information on the party split for the spending. It'll show us, we can click on candidate recipients. You can scroll down here and see who the specific recipients are. You can click donors and see, so because it's a PAC, it's taking money in and it's donating. So you can see who the big donors are to this PAC, and so on. And again, I believe the most recent data here was for, it looks like July. So again, you can use this. I would encourage using this data as sort of a jumping off point, but also making sure that you're checking at the FEC if you're trying to be like as up to date as possible to make sure that you have the information that you need. All right. So that's just sort of, that is all within the elections overview tab. And so you can get into some more specifics, looking at ballot measures, looking at fundraising by gender and race, looking at outside spending, all of that. So definitely take some time, poke around. Another main research tool that Open Secrets has is their donor lookup tool. And this one is the one that most closely resembles the FEC tool. Now, this is where, for those who are interested in looking up state donations, you can click this advanced search button below the big red search bar here, and you put the first and last name of the donor there. You can click the election cycle, the state of the donor, zip code, employer, all those things that were similar to what Rob showed with the FEC database. But when it comes to the jurisdiction of recipient, so this is the jurisdiction of the person receiving the money, you can choose if you want to look at all jurisdictions, if you want to look at federal jurisdictions, if you want to look at state, or if you want to look at like a specific state. So for those who might be interested in sort of looking at state level data, again, I just want with the caveat that this is a pretty new tool. This is the sort of interface to do that. I'm not gonna, this is pretty straightforward. It's exactly like what Rob was showing, just a little bit more of an overview. Maybe what I can show here is just sort of like what the data looks like. So I'll put in Jeff Yass and just show you sort of like what it looks like. So here we have, so it's a little bit different than what we saw. We don't have the connection to that original form like what Rob was showing, but you can see this is money to candidates. Sometimes it'll say money to super PAC or outside group, contributor name, employer, occupation, when the contribution was made, the amount, the recipient, and the recipient jurisdiction. And so this is where you can see, so this person is in South Carolina, we have Wisconsin, you have your federal, and folks like that. So this is a great tool to try to do both. If you have one donor and you want to see both, like with Jeff Yass, that's great. If you're just looking for a specific jurisdiction, that state, use it for that. Okay. And so with that, I just have a couple more things to show. And I want to show real quick that if you actually hit this research, so you can get to this donor lookup here from this elections and fundraising. If you hit this research tools thing up here, you'll get these two that I showed you, the donor lookup and the get local. Those are both available right there. The rest are kind of like data sets to serve, and you can sort of play around with some of their other resources. A few people have asked about APIs. You can get to that there as well. The last thing I'm going to show, because I'm deeply out of time, is the industries and interest groups section. This is really interesting because I honestly think this is where Open Secrets shines, because they do a lot of work to take all of that employer information, on all that information of donations from corporate PACs, and code it by industry and category, and then combine it all into 13 primary sectors. And so what's great about this is you might be looking at just like huge lists of donations from oil and gas corporations or individuals that list that, but it's really hard to add all of that up. Open Secrets has done that work for us. So if you're interested in oil and gas donations in this election cycle, which we have selected here, 2024, it's under the energy and natural resources sector. You can see the total amount of money that's given, the total that's going to the parties and candidates, to outside groups. So again, going to PACs and super PACs, and then percentage that goes to Dems versus Republicans. And what's great about this, you can click this, it has its own little profile page to kind of dive a little bit more in. You can see who the top contributors are within that sector. And you can also see which industries are included in that sector. So like I said, the taxonomy that they have set up is really, there's 13 primary sectors, and then within that, a bunch of different industries and categories. So if you want to get a little bit more granular, for instance, we were talking about a few utilities campaigns. If I want to look at this electric utilities category, oh, it looks like you guys are all on this website and Open Secrets cannot handle it. I have never seen that pop up before. But basically you get to this exact same type of thing, but with a little more granular data related to electric utilities. And so we can see who the top contributors are within this category, and so on. Trends, there's lobbying in here. You'll learn more about that in October, and so on. So a really cool sort of tool to explore and learn. And again, this is really where, like, if you're looking for like high level numbers of a particular industry, that's really where to go. And then the last thing I'm going to show is around the organization profiles. So we looked at this earlier. Who are the top contributing organizations? Very similar to the sectors. You can click on this and you can see the different profile pages. You can also use this little search bar here to search for a particular organization to look them up. So let's say for some reason I was looking at Marathon Oil earlier, so I'll do that again. So let's give me some results here. I'm gonna pull it up. And I can go to their page and figure out who the top recipients are of their donations. Okay, so that was a semi-fast look at a bunch of this data on Open Secrets. If you have questions, definitely put them in the chat here. But again, it's just such an immense database. Like I said, we're going to be going over more of it in October. And with that, I think I am kicking it to Rob, but I'm still going to be sharing my screen.
Yes, thanks, Jen. So yeah, I guess now I'm gonna take a little time at the end here just to talk through some of the challenging things, some of the kind of like tricky things about doing this type of research that we've come across, as well as, you know, wherever possible, sharing some tips for how to I guess how to meet some of those challenges. So first off, we can go to the next slide. Um, Yeah. So first of all, there's different rules at different levels of government. Um, oh, go back. Thanks. So there's different sort of limits on how much, you know, individual contributors can give, both to like PACs, but also to party committees, candidate committees. There's different rules about whether corporations and LLCs can give. You know, it's prohibited at the federal level. At several states, it is allowed. It's also, you know, there can be different rules about whether donors have to disclose their employer and what their occupation is. Um, so yeah, really, I think, you know, the best way to sort of keep apprised of that is to look up the rules in the jurisdiction that you're researching, or the, you know, jurisdictions if you're looking at one donor giving across, you know, a variety of places. We have a link in the slides here, which obviously you can't click it right now, but after this presentation, you'll get the slide deck. You'll be able to click that link. That'll go directly to the rules for this campaign cycle at the federal level. But you can also, you know, generally really easily find your state's rules on your state board of elections website, which if you don't know what that is, you can, you know, generally really easily find that by going to whatever search engine you use and type in, you know, campaign contribution limits and then the name of your state. The other thing I would say about this is that there's also different calendars for when donations have to be reported. So if you'll think back to that FEC database that I was showing, that was showing all the donations that have come in and been processed by the Federal Elections Commission as of, you know, the most recent filing deadline, which I don't remember offhand when that was. You know, it is different again for different races, but also depending on if it is an election year or not. But you know, your states will all also have different calendars and different reporting requirements. Some states require, you know, more frequent reporting as you're getting closer to an election, and you can find those rules, what those dates are for your state, kind of the same way. You know, probably the fastest way to do it is to go to a search engine, search for the name of your state, and something like campaign finance calendar, or, you know, elections, you know, election donation calendar, something like that. You should be able to find that. Next is that there are going to be inconsistencies within donation records. And actually somebody pointed this out during the chat when I was showing that example for Jeffrey Yass. And I was really, you know, I kind of lit up when I saw that in the chat there, because I knew this was going to be something that's really important to keep in mind. And that, you know, all of this information that is reported by the Federal Election Commission, that is going to be reported by your state board of elections, that is coming from the actual campaign committees, PACs, party committees themselves. And generally those committees are, you know, getting that information from the donors. So what that means is very frequently you can sometimes get donations from, Jeffrey Yass in the same database that you're getting donations from Jeff Yass. So really, you're going to want to make a point to search multiple spellings for people's names, use shortened versions of their names. Where this can get, really tricky is if there is, a typo or, a transcription error in putting in someone's name. Maybe they spelled it Jeff, Rye or something like that. And so you're going to want to search, generally like a bunch of different variations of names. And if you are, really being, a full kind of a completionist Pokemon gotta catch them all for these donations, what you might want to do is see if you can download, an entire list of contributions in the period you're looking for and be searching those addresses as well, just to catch any other name variations that you may have not thought to search for. Sort of a corollary to this is that, different people frequently have the same name. And I sort of talked about that when I was showing that example. And again, like I said back then, the best way to try to sort those things out is to look for other corroborating information in those records. Compare the addresses to between a donation you're not sure about and the one on a donation you are sure about. Always be keeping those lists of addresses and company names associated with the donors that you're looking at. Any sort of like kind of ancillary information around, just like the donor name, the recipient, and the amount of money. That's all stuff that you are going to be able to use, to cross check things that you might not be exactly sure about. And that kind of goes right into the next thing. Donors sometimes give different addresses. So yeah, be keeping those lists. This can be really helpful. Frequently, donors will give money from and they'll list like their business address, but they'll also give money at a different time and list their home address on there. And so by keeping those addresses and keeping them associated with the names, however you like to keep notes or organize your research, that can really help, again, sort of capture donations that you may have missed. It can also be really useful, especially that address information, is to determine if donors you're looking at, if they are giving as well as, maybe their spouses or any children that live at home. If you're seeing, several donations from people with the same last name, all coming from the same address, that can be really useful to know, because a lot of these, especially these really, really high dollar donors, they will max out, but their spouses will max out too, and their states and their children will max out. And that's really and in order to, sort of fully capture the amount of money flowing, again, especially from these really big donors, you're going to want to be checking children and spouses as well. We can go on to the next slide, please. This one is something that I don't currently have a great solution for. And, if there's any researchers who have experience with this in the chat and you have a great fix for it, I would definitely be psyched to see what that is. But the next kind of or challenge, anyways, I'm going to talk about is donations coming through conduits like ActBlue or WinRed. These conduits, these are like companies that will frequently they'll build like a very easy to use like technology platform that you can create a profile on, put in your credit card, and then just click a button every time you want to give somebody money. And this conduit they'll charge your credit card for the money, they will take it, they will give it to whatever committee you said you wanted to give it to. Where the problem arises for researchers is that the FEC does not currently have like a great way to handle all these donations coming through these conduits. And this is, really especially an issue when you are trying to look at, donations for elections that are going on right now for ongoing campaigns, because frequently you will get, multiple records created for one donation. If I give somebody, $25 through ActBlue, at first in the FEC database, it's going to show that I gave $25 to Act Blue, and then Act Blue gave $25 to the whatever politician. So basically, the problem that arises here is that you cannot just search someone's name, immediately go to that export button, download the whole thing, find the amount column, and then just add that all up real fast and get an accurate number. Because if they're giving any money through these conduits, you're probably, especially if these are recent donations, you're probably going to double count these. And there's a few ways that you can handle this. I think the sort of very work intensive way is to be opening up those report images that I showed. And if you open the one, going from the conduit to the candidate, as well as the one going from the donor to the conduit, they will have, it'll basically have like a little memo text on it that'll say, this money, it came through, is, associated with a donation through the conduit. And this is where you can find that record of the money going to the conduit. So you can sort of find those unique identifier numbers on those report images, match those up in order to sort of filter out the donations just showing that are coming from the person to the conduit. The other thing you can do is to open up the raw data. This is what the FEC recommends doing. And I guess I don't have a lot of experience doing it this way, but I guess there is a way to sort of deduplicate things there. But again, this is going to be a somewhat labor intensive process, and it's, gets really difficult if you're looking at like a big group of donors or across like a wide range of time there. Next thing I want to talk about is dark money. Yeah. This is a term we hear kind of flying around a lot these days. It can actually refer to a few different things. And so I want to kind of break that down, because basically these are all ways where donors and organizations can follow the exact letter of all the campaign disclosure laws, but still make it really difficult to, anywhere from very difficult to absolutely impossible to trace political influence money back to an original source. So the first thing is super PACs. And like Molly talked about way at the beginning of this presentation, is that super PACs can raise unlimited money from people, from corporations, from nonprofit organizations that are allowed to give, and they can spend unlimited money supporting or opposing candidates. Now, super PACs do have to disclose their donors, but many of the groups that donate to super PACs do not. So, for example, we've had examples where, you've got a super PAC spending, $25 million, and you try to look up who the donors to that super PAC are. And there's, maybe one donation going into it for $25 million from either an LLC or a 501c4 group that, does not have to disclose their donors. There's no there's no real actionable information out about them. And it's basically, mystery money. Now, 501c4 groups, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit more in a second, they do have to disclose some information, like who their board members are, big grants that they make. But their calendar is on a pretty, heavy delay. So a 501c4 group spending money in 2024 is probably not going to be disclosing who its current board members are, where it's located, any of that financial information until like the end of 2025. And at that point, the election's over, the money has had its effect, they ran their ads already, and it doesn't really matter if people figure out who it was behind it after the fact, because, they already did what they were trying to do. So speaking of 501c4s, oh, sorry, no, I'm still going on this one. Thanks. Speaking of 501c4s, again, these are groups that can raise unlimited money. They don't have to disclose their donors. They are allowed to engage in some political activity, including some of this donating. basically just can't be the main thing that they do. And again, they have to disclose like who their board members are, where their office is. These are all publicly available records. If you want to learn more about researching them, you can check out the video for our nonprofits training. But again, yeah, they don't have to do this reporting when you're talking about an election calendar till, the next year, essentially. The last kind of like dark money source I want to talk about are LLCs. Again, this is another one that Molly talked about kind of at the top of the hour. Um, these are business entities, and they really have this is like the least regulated, the most anonymous type of business that you can make. You can go online, and spend, $200 and create an LLC with whatever totally, bland, innocuous, anonymous sounding name that you want, in about like a day. Um, they can bring in unlimited money. They don't, there's, really, very, very little reporting requirements about, what they have to report. And they can give unlimited amounts to super PACs and 501c groups, like C4s, C3s, C6s, whatever. And in some states, they can actually give directly to political campaigns. Where I live in New York, this was a really big issue because you would have, real estate developers that have, a different LLC for every single building that they own. And then they were, taking this money and channeling it directly into political campaigns. New York is also a state where, until very recently, the limit for how much an LLC could give was the same as the limit for how much an individual could give, which, at the time was like $47,000 to a statewide campaign. Just in comparison, the most an individual can give to a federal campaign this year, since the last time the limits went up, is $3,300. Now in New York, it's something like $18,000. But back then, it was like almost $50,000 you could give through every LLC you had. Now in New York passed some rules in order to try to cut this back, but in a lot of other states, LLCs can still give directly, and they are some of the most difficult types of business organizations to sort of unwind and try to figure out who's behind them. That was the last for me. I think we're gonna run a quick poll here to get some feedback from you all. Thanks to everyone who stuck on through this whole thing. And I think I'm gonna kick it back to Molly now for our to close this out. I think you're muted, Molly.
Whoops. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Jen, for sharing all that. Yeah, we're gonna wrap up. But Allie is gonna launch a poll. If you all could answer that, that would be great. This is the first time we're doing this series, and so we're thinking about how to improve upon it for next year, how we want it to be different or the same next year. So that should be up on your screen. I'm just gonna wait like 1 minute for folks to answer. If you could share a little bit with us about what worked well this time, and what might be improved for next time. Thanks, everybody. Okay, awesome. I think we can close that out, Allie. Thank you so much. And for folks who are interested in continuing to learn, we have our next training in October on the 17th, the same time. It's going to be about researching politicians. It should be a really good one. If you signed up for this one, you should get an email with the information on how to register for that. And we'd love to see you. If we can go to the next slide, Rob. And we will have the slides shared up at this QR code. So you can scan that. And all the slides, both for this training and for the last couple of ones, will be in there. And later this week, we will upload a recording of this training to our YouTube channel, so people can also check that out there. Awesome. And if people have questions, we're always here to help, whether it's like a big research question or a small one. You can reach out to me, Molly at Little Sis, and also follow our social media and our newsletter for kind of all the most up-to-date power research that we're doing. And yeah, thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we'll hope to see you next month for Researching Politicians. And thank you to Allie for doing all the tech, Rob and Jen for walking us through all that. Bye, everyone.